how damaging are these last two results? It's been a terrible week for United.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than losing 3-0 at home to your closest rivals and then throwing away the competition that you won last year against the opponents that you beat in the final, again losing 3-0 at home. And it wasn't like Newcastle were at full strength either. They had 4 fullbacks starting across the back line. Matt Targett started in midfield before getting injured. Anthony Gordon was their striker. It was Newcastle far from their best, but Man United now feel like they're probably at their lowest point since Sir Alex Ferguson's departure, which, considering the lows that we saw under Mourinho, Van Gaal, and in the final days of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, is really quite damning. I mean, 8 defeats in 15 games this season, for the first time in 60 years. It's been a disaster.
You wondered how it could get worse after such a defeat to their, bitter rival City, but was this worse?
I think so, yes. I think given the fact that they weren't playing Man City, like Duke said, an understrength Newcastle side, and just the fact that it's another home defeat. This was a record that Ten Hag prided himself on last year, especially in the Premier League. And just the manner of the defeat, I think, was much worse than the City game. I think it seemed a bit desperate in the second half that Højlund, Rashford and Bruno Fernandes were all brought on 64 minutes after United had gone 3-0 down. It just seemed totally bizarre. There seemed to be no real game plan, no real patterns of play. I think that this has probably been the most damning defeat of United's season so far, even if it is in a lesser competition than the Premier League or the Champions League.
Yeah, and the stats don't lie, do they, Mark? Just how concerning is, I guess, their home form?
Yeah, it's not been good at all, has it? Gary Neville said this morning. Last night we saw the theatre of dreams turn into the theatre of nothing. Every single Man United fan is bored and flat. And this is why. Let's take a look at their home record this season in all competitions. You can see games played 10. They've won just 5. They haven't drawn and they've lost 5. They've only scored 13 goals in 10 matches. This is Manchester United at home. They've conceded 16. And what makes this worse, the comparison to last season, it's like chalk and cheese. United lost only 1 Premier League game last season at Old Trafford and once in Europe. So, Dougie and Michael, where has it all gone wrong?
I think it's very difficult to pinpoint one particular area. It's sort of like trying to pinpoint where water is coming out of a sieve. It feels like there are so many multiple things wrong with Man United over the last 10 years. There's been a very mixed strategy. There's been a number of people in charge at director of football level. There has been investment in the playing squad, but it feels like it's often been quite reactive. It's been quite desperate at points. And it doesn't feel like there's been a clear strategy. You go back to this summer, there's been a number of off-the-field issues concerning players that have all played in a similar position. That can't have helped the squad morale or any sort of cohesion in that squad as well. And then in terms of playing style and philosophy, Ten Hag says he doesn't really have the players available to play in the same way he did at Ajax, which, again, if you're from a playing perspective, can't be exactly brilliant to hear your boss sort of damning your own ability. So I feel like he has been backed with a certain amount of money, but has there been enough scrutiny from those above him on the players that he wants to bring in? And it just feels like everything that could go wrong is going wrong at the moment.
Yeah, and same question, I guess, to you, Michael, but there's been a lot of talk about the confidence and the lack of confidence of these players and maybe lack of confidence in their manager now as well.
Yeah, the performance last night was certainly concerning. I was on here yesterday saying that although there are a lot of rumblings in the press now, a lot more criticism of Ten Hag than we've seen before, that generally the club and the fans tend to stick by their manager at Man United, or at least they tend to have a lot of patience. The main question is the squad. That will ultimately be what decides Ten Hag's fate now that he is certainly under pressure at Man United. I think you have to look at it from 2 perspectives. One, I think Ten Hag has got a number of decisions wrong this season. Look at the lineup, the defensive lineup that he played against Man City, dropping Varane, dropping Reguilon in place of or for Lindelof and Evans. You have to look at the signings that were made in the summer. He has been given responsibility for signings, for better or worse, and his signings from the summer, none of them have taken off as yet. And you have to look at the playing style as well. They lack identity. They seem to have regressed since halfway through
Because they have to look
season.
at the playing style. There isn't really a playing style, is there?
And and Ten Hag was brought in to instill a philosophy by which the club would then be based around for years to come. He was supposed to build a side that would, challenge for trophies and also set up a side that would thrive under, say, the next coach after him. And yeah, that just hasn't been the case. And it is the same story again with Man United. We've seen this with so many managers. So yeah, it does feel like it always feels like there's a deeper problem at the club, but Ten Hag does need to take responsibility for what's happened this season. Having said that, key injuries to players like Lissandro Martinez and Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw's not back until the end of the month. Lissandro, who probably was United's key player last season, not back until January. And then individual performances just aren't good enough. Rashford, should have scored, I think, nearly 4 times the goals that he has, given the chances that have been created for him. Someone like Casemiro, who was such a key player last season, has dropped off massively. So there are a number of factors. But yeah, it is concerning, and yeah, the game against Fulham on Saturday is going to be absolutely crucial to telling where this squad is at in terms of their confidence in the manager.
So that's their next game. But Mark, what do their fixtures look like from there on in?
Well, luckily for Manchester United, most of their games are away from home coming up. The next 6, as you can see on the screen, we've got Fulham away, then in the Champions League at Copenhagen. Their only home game in the next 6 is at home to Luton, who we know are struggling in the Premier League. Then it's Everton away, which will be a tough challenge because Sean Dyche has got them playing some good stuff at the moment. They're on a really effective run. Then it's more Champions League action away at Galatasaray. And then finally in the next 6, Newcastle away, who they were beaten by last night. So, yeah, we talked earlier about the tricky record they have at home. Would it be any different away from home? That's their next 6. And let's take a look at the managerial comparisons then. It's something we've seen on Sky Sports News throughout the course of this morning. The last 12 matches for Erik ten Hag compared to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Jose Mourinho's final 12 matches. You can see Erik ten Hag won 5 out of 12, lost 7. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer won 4, drew 2 and lost 6. And Jose Mourinho, who won the Carabao Cup with Manchester United, won 5, drawn 3, lost 4. So you can see Erik ten Hag's record there, not fantastic compared to the previous 3 bosses. But sacking the manager, not always the right thing to do. And clearly Erik ten Hag is going through his toughest spell as the United boss. But how much time does he need to turn this around, if he can? And how much, more importantly, time will he get?
Goodness me. Who needs to take responsibility here? Is it Ten Hag? Is it the players? Has he lost the dressing room? He didn't seem as animated as I would have thought a manager would have been under the circumstances. He almost seemed to kind of sort of retreat into himself from the bench last night, and you had these seems like a bit of a disconnect there, doesn't there?
Yeah, definitely. I think last year when he took on Cristiano Ronaldo and won, and when he benched Maguire and took the captaincy away from him, that seemed to go down quite well with the squad. But it feels like his big decisions this year, putting Sancho, making him train with the reserves, making sure that he eats in a different cafeteria, things like that seem to have, maybe it's not just solely down to that, but it seems to have created more of a disconnect between him and the squad. As I already mentioned, those comments after the Manchester derby I thought were pretty disappointing. And these are a lot of his players. 5 of his players that he brought in, during his tenure started last night. They spent over £400 million in 3 windows. And I think 6 players that he brought in finished the game last night. And you just look at the players that are making mistakes in the build-up to goals. Amrabat last night, losing the ball in midfield for Willock's goal. Mason Mount slightly at fault for the first goal after Livramento burst past him. And there was just poor marking for the Lewis Hall goal as well. So I think he does need to take a lot of this on his shoulders. At the same time, it can't help when you're working under an ownership group that are incredibly unpopular, that you've got a new owner potentially coming in to take on a 25% stake. How does that even work in terms of actual who's making decisions, who's taking responsibility for decisions, the people above him in terms of director level as well, they'll be nervous about their jobs now. So the environment just can't be very easy to thrive in. In terms of changing manager as well, I think he'll probably be saved, at least in the time being, by the lack of good options available, to be honest. There isn't really an outstanding candidate. People will say Roberto De Zerbi, but De Zerbi's football takes a certain ability on the ball, which I just don't think a lot of Man United players seem to have at the moment, at least in terms of building up from the back, as we've seen with injuries this year. So I think Ten Hag is safe in his job for now, but he desperately needs a turnaround in fortune soon.